Baseball's winter meetings are this week. Let's get prepared for what the White Sox might do during this week of wheeling and dealing. Next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox might kickstart their monumental rebuild at the winter meetings, or they might barely do anything. Let's discuss the feast or famine possibilities in the first segment. Then, if the Sox do trade Garrett Crochet this week or this offseason, I talked with FanSided's CubbiesCribs.com co-site expert Jake Misner about why the Cubs are a great trade partner. And also, I spoke with site expert Michael Fisher of FanSided's ThatBallsOuttaHere.com to get some more Phillies insight into them being a good trade partner for not only Crochet, but maybe Luis Robert Jr. And you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, why do I think this will be an all-or-nothing winter meetings? Comes down to, is a contender willing to meet Chris Getz's huge price for Garrett Crochet? If they do, I think a deal is done. And if they don't, well, Garrett Crochet will still be part of the Chicago White Sox at the end of Thursday. And, contenders are still probably going to be waiting on Corbin Burnes, Max Fried, and even Jake Flaherty, as he's been listed in that kind of tier 1 category of free agents. And, they could be thinking, why not just spend money instead of having to give up, the $3 million to pay Garrett Crochet this year, but also potential future assets to get him. So I think this could drag out until spring training, like the Dylan Cease trade did. But otherwise, I'll be surprised if the White Sox make any other moves, as all the outcomes on my jump to conclusion, Matt, point to waiting out the market to clear for those 1 to 2 F4 players that they're going to be probably targeting, getting to the point where they'll just take a 1-year deal just to have a job. I don't see the Sox giving, a ton of multi-year contracts, or even if they do, probably it's just going to be a 2-year deal. So I would say there are about 4 storylines to follow, and I'll go over the positions too that the White Sox, could see if there's a free agent that is willing to take, a 1-year deal in that 1 to 2 F4 player bucket there. So first, obviously the first storyline is if Garrett Crochet is traded, that's the clear where they're going to be looking at. Everybody's going to be looking at right now, especially now that Juan Soto signed for a small GDP to go to the New York Mets. Now that the biggest free agent market, probably the biggest free agent ever until, the next 25-year-old player makes it to free agency, is off the market, Garrett Crochet is probably going to be the talk of the winter meetings. And I still say if he's going to get traded. Obviously it's going to be when. I think the Sox are definitely dead set on trading Garrett Crochet. From the logistical standpoint, they have to trade him because he's the only one that's going to fetch the hitting, the young hitting impact bats that they need in the trade market. On the flip side, where it's sad that they're not going to be, why they're trading him, it's because they just don't want to pay him. They don't want to extend him through the rest of the decade. I don't think the owner wants to pay that price. So that's why they're going to trade him, because his market is probably at its highest. But they could obviously still hold on to him going into the season and then try to flip him at the deadline, because he would still have the second half of the season and a full another year of control. So this isn't technically like they have to trade him to get max value. They could still roll the dice, hope he doesn't get injured, hope he continues to be, progressing as a stud and go into the trade deadline. It's just that this is for sure, he's going to have, a high market right now. But Bob Nightingale obviously ranked him as the top player who could be traded during the winter meetings in his Sunday column. And this is what he wrote: no player will command as much on the trade market than Crochet, the ace of the Chicago White Sox. They're asking for the team's top prospects, and no one blames them. He's young, 25. He's cheap, projected to earn $2.9 million by MLB trade rumors, and he's a stud, striking out 209 batters in 146 innings last season. The White Sox have had some serious talks with the Philadelphia Phillies, but rejected the concept of Alec Boehm and outfielder Justin Crawford. The San Diego Padres would love him and have dealt plenty of prospects in the past, but told the White Sox they are hanging on to catcher Ethan Salas and shortstop Leonidas DeVries. The Red Sox lurk. In the end, the White Sox will trade him to the team that gives them the most prized prospects and hope they never again experience anything like their embarrassing 41-121 season. And remember, Bob has some very good, inside ties to the White Sox. So usually when he writes something, it's usually coming either from, the general manager, speculative, the owner, speculative, but either way, it's coming from someone inside the White Sox. So he definitely, when he says something, pretty much take it as gospel. But breathe a sigh of relief, first of all, that the Sox are not interested in Alec Boehm. Obviously, if he had more club control, then yes, it makes sense to have him in the return. Where like Weiler Abreu, for example, has like 5 more years of club control. That makes sense for the White Sox to take on. Boehm has 2 years of club control. So in essence, you're just, trading one all-star with 2 years of club control for another. The difference is the one guy has a bat, he hits, plays third base, and is a clubhouse character issue. Why would you trade for that? Doesn't make any sense. You're just basically trading one problem for another. Again, unless you're trying to grab an asset back, hope he plays well again, recap, doesn't have that second half, and then you try to flip him at the deadline. But even then, you're not extending him, because if you're not extending Crochet, why would you extend Boehm? It just doesn't make sense. That's why I was never like, why are they, why are the Phillies even trying to think, hey, maybe the Sox will take Boehm? I think it was a Hail Mary from them. But the reason I'm putting, again, also, if Garrett Crochet is getting moved is, look at it. The Sox just wanted the Padres two top prospects, both at A-ball. And there is a precedent of, teams, the last time that a team gave up a top prospect for a pitcher, an ace pitcher, was the Mariners giving him Novelli Marte to the Reds because he was at A-ball. He was still an unknown. But the Padres are like, no, thank you. We're going to hold on to these guys, even though they're years and years and years away from helping out the Padres. So I think what needs to happen for teams to be willing to give up the goods is you need Corbin Burns, Max Fried, and even Jake Flaherty to sign. And then you need Rocco Sasaki to make his decision early, like this week, because I think he's getting posted this week officially. Because I could see the Padres saying, we're going to hold on to our single A guys because we can get a rotation boost with Sasaki. Now, MassLive.com's Red Sox beat reporter Chris Cotillo tweeted this out, and this is at Chris Cotillo. Continue hearing Red Sox are just on the periphery of Garrett Crochet talks and are not aggressors at all, at least to this point. Cincinnati seen as a real threat to land Crochet. Yankees believed to be in too. Then insider John Morosi said last night on MLB Network that, quote, based on what I've been hearing today, the Crochet trade is getting closer. It's now increasingly possible that he'll be moved at the winter meetings, end quote. So again, I'm still putting it as if, not when, at the winter meetings, just because it just seems like every team is just hesitant to throw out what the White Sox are wanting, and that is a top prospects with an S. Morosi, though, did say Boston is one player away. And they are getting more inclined to possibly throw in Marcelo Mayo. And if I'm wrong, I said I don't think the Red Sox are trading Marcelo Mayer. Well, it sounds like the reports are that they actually like Christian Campbell more than Mayer. And now that they're open to saying, you know what, we might move on with it, move on from Mayer. We might put him in the Crochet trade. And they just lost out on Juan Soto. So, obviously I think Boston's going to pivot to Corbin Burns first. But if they lose out on him, because it sounds like the Giants are really in on him and about, getting close from, the last reports over the weekend, that's going to leave Boston with, hey, we got to still make an impact move. Who's left? And Garrett Crochet is a lot younger and potentially extendable, because he said to any team that was going to trade for him at the deadline, you better give me an extension. So you might be not only able to trade for Crochet, but you could extend him as well. But again, it goes back to if, because this deal could have been done, obviously, before the winter meetings even started. Honestly, the Phillies, Orioles, Red Sox, they could pull the trigger on a deal by just throwing in Colby Mayer, or Aiden Miller. But none of those three teams wanted to do that. So I think they have to get more desperate. So they're hemming and hawing. Maybe a team is finally going to be like, you know what? We're going to get in a room with Chris Getz, and we're going to not leave that room until we hammer out a deal. And if it means we got to give up our top guy, we'll give up our top guy. We'll see. But one reason I'm also concluding that is this is what James Fegan wrote recently on SoxMachine.com. Scouts and evaluators from other teams are more inclined to describe Crochet's health history, making him risky, than offering any special confidence in the theory that shifting to a 5-day starter schedule has given him a sustainable physical routine going forward. But while that creates a wide diversity of opinions of how different teams evaluate Crochet, reducing the chances of an overpay, he was last seen looking healthy and dominant. Even scouts who expressed concern about the year that comes after Crochet setting a new career high in innings by a lot acknowledged his recent performance is such that the White Sox can restock the system with a team that believes in Crochet. So that's the other thing. You got to still realize that scouts are holding on and executives are still holding on to, hey, the guy had Tommy John surgery in 2022 and he barely pitched in 2023. And I could see them being on the phone and be like, well, you had to put him on a pitch limit in July. So I think this is going to need a little bit more fleshing out on the market for a team to come back and say, okay, here's Marcelo Mayer. We don't know, that's why I'm still just going to put if during the winter meetings. I think a lot of this all could be done is some, hey, we got to hype up the winter meetings type salesman. But if it happens during the winter meetings, obviously I'll jump in live. I'll have reaction. I'll try to get some, whoever the host is, do a crossover segment of the team that trades for him. We'll do all that. I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm just still putting on the possibility in the storyline is if Garrett Crochet is traded at the winter meetings. But the same piece I just read about on Fegan wrote about is why the Sox should wait to trade Luis Robert Jr., which is the second storyline to watch. I have a feeling the Sox are definitely going to be dangling Luis Robert Jr. in the trade market. And I hope the Sox take the gamble and bring back Robert Jr. to reclaim the trade value and move him at the deadline. And I spoke about it at length on last week's show. Third storyline is the Sox are going to desperately try to find someone to take on Andrew Benintendi's $47.5 million left on his contract. I doubt they're going to find anyone, but I'm scared. I'm terrified. I sometimes have to go in the corner and tell myself it's going to be okay, but I'm scared Getz is going to tie that salary relief to a Crochet deal. Remember, this is the White Sox, and when it comes to getting contracts off their books, especially if they can, get that salary relief, do not put it past this organization. They've hurt us before. That's why it's a real threat. And maybe, just hopefully, Getz can convince Jerry to eat like maybe half of Benintendi's deal, and they could move him. Because obviously he did hit 20 home runs. He's shown that if he can pull the ball, that he could actually hit some home runs. And he obviously had a strong second half. And he's had, I think it's well known that anybody that goes to the White Sox just becomes the worst version of themselves. So maybe a team might be like, you know what, if you pay for half of it, maybe we'll take on the other half. And then you got the Rule 5 draft. That's the fourth storyline. And I'm going to talk about the targets that they could have on tomorrow's show. But the Sox should take as many players as allowed within the rules. This is a great way to possibly get some future pieces for the bullpen. They're basically looks for $50K. Why not take as many allowable players as you can, especially if that can help you get some bullpen pieces. And then here are the positions that the Sox could look at in free agency, for free agents willing to take their small pittance offers. Shortstop, it cannot hurt to have a veteran bridge. Hopefully just someone that can play better defense than Paul DeYoung, but it still can't hurt until Colson Montgomery is ready. Obviously, you have Brooks Baldwin there, but you might be better off getting a veteran because you can flip that veteran if they're productive at the trade deadline. Catcher, because they seem intent on letting Edgar Caro start in the minors. Pitching, especially if you're trading Garrett Crochet, fine, grab a veteran starter, but definitely find some relievers who can be flipped at the deadline. Well, one team that is a perfect match for Crochet might be the Chicago Cubs, and I spoke with CubbyCribs.com's Jake Misner to discuss why, and that conversation is next on Locked On White Sox. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off site-wide during their cyber sale at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code MLB. With 5 generations of experience, Omaha Steaks consistently delivers the world's best steak experience, and their gifting experts have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide during the Cyber Sale at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code MLB and a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at OMAHA steaks.com and an extra $30 off with promo code MLB, and minimum purchases may apply. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch a show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. Well, maybe Garrett Crochet does not get traded to the Cubs. But man, after talking with Jake Misner, co-site expert of CubbiesCrib.com, part of the Fan Side Network, you would like what the Cubs have to offer. Thanks for joining me, Jake. Why are the Cubs possibly interested in Garrett Crochet?
You know, their rotation strength is solid. I mean, it's a strength. It was a strength last year. Matthew Boyd is nice, but he made 8 starts last year. He's not going to be. He can't be your number one rotation upgrade this winter. But Crochet is an ace. If you're evaluating him on like the old school baseball card numbers and you think that he's not an ace based on his win-loss record, more power to you. But he's the real deal. And I think on paper, the Cubs and Sox match up really well in terms of what the Sox are looking for and what the Cubs have.
Yeah, let's jump into what the Cubs have to offer. What prospects are actually realistically you think would be in play?
I think the only untouchable right now for the Cubs is probably Matt Shaw. They'd probably be reluctant to trade Cam Smith. He was their first rounder out of Florida State this year, and the kid just took off, hit the ground running as soon as he started his pro ball. They might be iffy on Cade Horton. I think trading Horton now would be selling low. He missed most of the year with an injury. Other than that, I think they're open for business. I really think they'll move off outfielders, Kevin Alcantara. I think they're pretty high on Owen Casey. I think if they trade Cody Bellinger, I think Casey's probably the next man up in terms of the org depth chart. But I really do think outside of Matt Shaw, they're open to listening on pretty much anybody.
With Casey, though, do you think it might be a waste to have him because you still have a crowded outfield? So basically, you would be looking at being your 4th outfielder. Is that the best way to start him, or do you think, hey, let's leverage him to get to Garrett Crochet, or am I just completely off base?
No, so I think assuming they trade Bellinger, which seems to be the industry-wide assumption at this point, is once Soto signs, then the Bellinger sweepstakes is going to start. Then I think Casey could start and right. I think Suzuki could DH full-time. He's had some weird defensive issues over the last few years. He was a Gold Glove winner in Japan. Everyone had really high hopes for him coming over defensively, and he's had quite a few miscues. With about a month and a half left in the season this year, they actually moved Suzuki to DH full-time, and his numbers blew up. So the hope is, for 3 years now, the Cubs have talked about, all right, if Suzuki can just do what he did for this 6 weeks over the course of a whole season, he's an MVP. And it's the same shtick every winter. But I think the hope is if you take him out of the outfield and just have him focus on offense, that maybe he'll bring that consistency and that he's shown really, really elite abilities, but he can't sustain it over the course of the season. So hopefully moving him to the DH spot full time and letting one of the young players like Casey take over and right would help him tap into that.
All right, so let's say Shaw and Casey are off the board or, just non-touchable. Kevin Alcantara still would be a very significant piece to add on the south side. Am I right?
Oh, for sure. I think the Cubs, what makes the Cubs unique and why I think they're a really good match for Crochet, or really any team looking to make a move for like near big league ready impact talent, the Cubs have more than half a dozen guys sitting at AAA on the top 100 list, and most of them are blocked. Even finding a spot for Shaw is going to be difficult because you've got Dansby and Nico up the middle. They traded for Isaac Paredes at third. So again, maybe they trade Nico Hoerner. We've heard rumblings of the Cubs and Mariners talking about Hoerner. He had flexor tendon surgery right after the offseason started. He's not expected to be ready for opening day. So I think, again, you're selling low there. But the Cubs have a ton of guys knocking on the door with nowhere to put them. So if you're Jed Hoyer, you got to do something with him. You can't just, he's collecting these prospects like infinity stones. It's not going to get him anywhere because there's nowhere to play him.
Yeah. Speaking of Jed Hoyer, I mean, does it seem like this would be feasible that he's actually going to be now to finally willing to give up these prize prospects? Because you're like, he's correcting them like infinity stones. And it's like, you only have to jump one team. That's all you got to do. It's not like you're Boston or Baltimore. So do you think maybe he finally wakes up and realizes, you know what, I just got to jump the Brewers. Why don't I make this deal for a guy who's also going to make $3 million next season?
Yeah, I think this is the winter where Jed gets really aggressive with trades. I know Cubs fans are chomping at the bit, but again, just a reminder to everybody, it's the first week of December. Winter meetings haven't even happened yet. There is a lot of offseason left. Last winter, the Cubs didn't do anything until the day before Cubs convention, mid-January. And that was when they signed Imanaga and made the trade for Michael Busch. So frankly, I think Jed's job's on the line. So he really needs to be aggressive because he needs to get this team back to the postseason in 2025.
All right, seeing how Jed Hoyer was able to get Michael Busch from Andrew Freeman and seeing how Chris Getz got Miguel Vargas from Andrew Freeman, how confident are you that Jed Hoyer is going to fleece Chris Getz?
I think that's what makes this potential, trade so interesting is that Getz and Hoyer know each other. They're neighbors. Like they are going to see each other at the grocery store, at the gas station.
They meet for like lunch once a week or something. Sorry.
Yeah, like they see each other all the time, which I don't know if that helps or hurts the deal coming together, but I'm very confident in Jed's ability to assess talent. I think he's done a great job with that. I think the big knock on him is he's very conservative. So this would be him stepping outside his comfort zone, trading blue chip prospects for a guy like Crochet. We haven't seen him do it. He took over after 2020 when Theo left. 2021 was the sell-off, and then it's been retooling since then. So this is one of his first off seasons where he has the pieces to be aggressive. The team is in a decent spot, 83 wins each of the last 2 years. Like you said, they just have to leapfrog Milwaukee. You've got, 8 top 100 guys. Most of them don't have a path to playing time in Chicago. It's time to turn those into big league resources.
Especially seven of them being position players, and the fact that, when you read the write-ups of the Cubs system, I know you're more familiar with it, but the pitching, it still seems to be the problem with, the Jed Hoyer, Theo Epstein front offices. They don't right now have the young pitching. What is it? They got Brown coming back from injury, so maybe that's another reason why they need to be motivated to trade for Crochet. Is just a lot of their young pitchers are not close to the big leagues.
Yeah, I think Brown, he's supposed to be ready. He had this weird neck injury that I don't think the Cubs ever officially diagnosed it. They spent months trying to get him back, finally shelved him. I think it was in early August. Shut down his season. Jordan Wicks, who was their first rounder out of Kansas State a couple years ago, he missed some time with injury. Cade Horton, obviously first round pick, looked really great in his first season of pro ball, and then kind of hit the wall with injuries last year. So they're getting better at it, but that's also considering they were starting at rock bottom. I think the one thing that could stop a Crochet trade from happening is the Cubs could have a rotation that is entirely left-handed outside of Jameson Taillon. I'm not saying that makes it impossible because you could trade Wicks and add another righty. There are ways around it, but I know that is the big concern with Cubs fans is they are freaking out about how many left-handers are projected to be in the rotation right now.
Do you think the Wicks would be part of a Crochet package? Is it even possible?
Oh, for sure. I think that I know the Cubs have been getting calls on Wicks and Javier Assad. I think you're obviously trading Garrett Crochet. You're not going to replace his production, but Wicks he projects to be a very reliable, steady back end starter in his career. He's very crafty. So I think obviously Getz is very interested in young, controllable position players, but I think if you can get Wicks in there, I think it makes sense for both sides.
And for White Sox fans listening to this, before you freak out, remember, Getz wants a veteran, even if it's someone who hasn't, started a ton, he wants someone to eat innings back, either in the free agent market or obviously in this trade. So this way you're not giving up a ton in terms of cash. You and my guy Jordan Campbell have been great on Cubby's Crib, hammering Jerry Reinsdorf potentially not wanting to make a deal with the Cubs because he doesn't want to help the North Siders. From your guys' perspective, how stupid is that to have this sort of inferiority complex?
I mean, it's just such a tired stick from Jerry. I mean, talk about the guy who helped. I mean, he should be a Chicago sports legend, owner of the Bulls. They win 6 titles, MJ era. Everybody still talks about it to this day. But what he's doing with the White Sox is laughable. You can't, it just seems like everything is half measures and half thought out. He's got so many problems from the on-field product in and of itself. You just wasted what was supposed to be your peak competitive window over the last 5 years. You've got this whole stadium debacle going on with the city, and now your pettiness is going to stop your front office from actually rectifying some of those issues. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and especially when, like I said on the show a couple days ago, if you want to feel inferior to the Cubs, it's because you did it to yourself. I mean, you didn't build up a neighborhood around Guaranteed Rate Field. You didn't. You left over-the-air television in the '80s because you wanted the cable grift. The Cubs stay on WGN, and none of that. I think he forgets that the Cubs were pretty good for the most part in the late '80s and early '90s when a lot of people of our my generation were starting to discover baseball. You traded Sammy Sosa, even though, hey, the free weights, but you traded Sammy Sosa to the Cubs to help them become a draw. Like, these are all self-inflicted wounds when it comes to this inferiority complex. And to me to say, well, if the Cubs give you the best offer and you say, no, I don't want to do that, that's just organizational malpractice.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, it's not just like me as a Cubs fan thinking Garrett Crochet would be a great rotation piece. He would. But just taking a step back and just looking at it, there are very few teams around the league who match up as well as the Cubs do on paper in what Getz is looking for. The Cubs check every box. I understand that, Jerry's got little brother syndrome looking up at the Wrigleyville and the north side, but this makes sense. If you can line this up, if Getz can put together a deal that you add, multiple top 100 guys, maybe throw in a Jordan Wicks or a Javier Assad to kind of stem the bleeding in the rotation as you rebuild, you got to let him do it. You got to quit interfering. You got to quit. He's like Jerry Jones light. Like Jerry Jones thinks that he is the only one who is smart enough or knowledgeable enough to call the shots for the Cowboys. And where's that got them? Same thing with the White Sox. Jerry is constantly sticking his finger in, and it just look where it got you. The worst team in Major League Baseball history. That's where it's got you.
Final question, because we're speaking of owners, how frustrated are Cubs fans getting with Tom Ricketts? Because it just seems like every time I read about the Cubs, I think he's still like citing that the biblical losses of 2020 are the reason why he cannot spend when, again, you're in division. If they even spent a fraction of what the Dodgers spent, they'd probably be dominating the NL Central for the next decade.
Yeah, it's frustrating because Tom has the money. That's not the issue here. The Cubs were valued last offseason. I want to say it was around $5.5 billion. When the Ricketts family bought the Cubs back in 2009, it was for, I want to say 900 million. So they're printing cash right now. It's not just the Cubs. They own almost the whole neighborhood now. They've got multiple business ventures. They've got the hotel across the street. They've got condominiums they own. I mean, it's blown up. And you can't say the Cubs don't spend. They, for whatever reason, went over the first CBT threshold last year by less than $1 million. Why? I'm not sure. They are spending, but I think the big missing piece, the Cubs have a lot of good players. Ian Happ, Dansby Swanson, even Cody Bellinger, very good players, above average players. They don't have star power. And to play in that market, especially in free agency now, you have to be able to spend at levels that, frankly, we've never seen before. The Cubs have never signed a $200 million contract. And then you look at this offseason and it's like, okay, Corbin Burns wants 200, Alex Bregman wants 200, Juan Soto's going to get 600 or 700 million. So it immediately, you just lop off the top end of free agency because ownership won't go there. And Of course, Tom says, hey, it's Jed's budget. He can do what he wants with it. But if you have an ownership group that looks at the CBT threshold as a soft salary cap, and you're Jed Hoyer, you got to be really creative. You got to field a whole roster, a complete roster. And yeah, it's frustrating. And I think watching what the Mets and the Dodgers do, they play with monopoly money, is only just irking fans more.
All right, there were some things that I missed that I wanted to discuss with Locked On Phillies host Connor Thomas. So I got Michael Fisher of FanSided's ThatBallsOuttaHere.com to cover the rest. And that discussion is next on Locked On White Sox. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And I always maintain FanDuel spreads, over, under, and money lines. They're fun to play. But if you want to win big or at least double your money, FanDuel's parlays, props, and futures is the way to go. So, for example, there's a 5-leg same-game parlay of Chase Brown, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Rico Dowdle, all scoring an anytime touchdown in tonight's Dallas and Cincinnati game. That's at plus 3,112 last I checked. And if you put $10 on that and it hits, you can win $311.25. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode and recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts, as this show is available on all major podcast platforms. So one thing I missed on my crossover episode with Locked On Phillies host Connor Thomas was a little more detail into why Phillies team president Dave Dombrowski is no longer willing to trade away his top prospects. And could the Phillies even be interested in Luis Robert Jr.? So I spoke with Michael Fisher, site expert of FanSided's ThatBallsOuttaHere.com, to fill in those blanks. All right, Michael, thank you for joining me. Michael, what happened to Dave Dombrowski being willing to trade whatever prospects he needed to get the team over the top?
I think recently in Philly they've had a bit of a I don't know if say a culture shift, or the last spring they were really talking about wanting to set up the team for success long term as well as in the immediate present. And they're talking about a dynasty, and they've got some big pieces on the farm right now. And I think that's why you're seeing Dombrowski really hesitant to act how he has in the past with his prior teams.
Is this, though, the time to be acting cautious, especially when you've got Steve Cohen and the Mets just spending left and right? They can just hand over money to Frankie Montas to be like their fourth starter.
That's it, right? Like it's they want to win now, but they don't want to mortgage the future, and it's obviously they're obviously having a tough time walking that tightrope right now because they want to make moves. They just, especially like last offseason, they were really happy with standing pat. They signed Whit Merrifield as their big offseason signing because they thought they were good enough, and they should have been good enough, but things didn't work out that way. So this offseason, it feels like they want to make a splash. They want to make sure they get the right player for the right package. And you're talking about prospects. I know when they were talking in July with the Sox about Garrett Crochet, the White Sox wanted Andrew Painter. And that was a non-starter, obviously, after seeing him in the Arizona Fall League. But there are some names that have been floating around from their top prospect pool that might be able to get something done.
So what would change then from them to, I do think the White Sox are probably going to pull back on Painter just because, they draft Hagen Smith now. They have guys that are, knocking on the door to start at the major league level or to be starters at the major league level. But what would change then for maybe Philly? Because it's still going to take a significant piece and a couple of pieces for the Phillies to possibly get Crochet.
Yeah, they I know they have thrown Justin Crawford's name out there. That's what's being reported in terms of what they've started to include in their package. Outfielder, I think is their number 3 prospect on pipeline right now. And for everything you hear about and see from this kid, he seems like he's going to be the real deal. But then again, it's a prospect, so you don't ever really know. But that's a name. And then just today, The Athletic, Matt Gelb put out that Aiden Miller apparently is not untouchable, as I think most of us had thought he was. I don't think we thought he was going to be included in discussions, but apparently he is at this point. And that's just something I read like an hour ago. So I don't know if Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford, I don't know if they'd put them in the same package for a Garrett Crochet. But if that can't get it done, then I don't know what will.
Yeah, then it's on the Sox. I mean, clearly the Sox would be asking for a painter, and even that I get that you're giving up an ace, but I don't understand on the back end where you have all this pitching, why you'd still want painter, like because they have Noah Schultz, for example, and they have Hagen Smith, so it's not like they need another ace stud pitcher back. What they need is impact bats, and clearly it looks like the Phillies have them, and not only that, the White Sox are willing to take guys that are not anywhere near the major league level. And that was one of the sticking points with the Dylan Cease market. Do you think, though, the Sox are going to be suckers for taking Alec Boehm in a trade?
Depends how badly they want a third baseman, I guess. Yeah, he's been one of the pieces that they've been talking about with multiple teams. If they want an MLB proven bat, obviously he has some flaws, but he'll play every game for you. It feels like he's going to get traded this offseason. They haven't put the kibosh on those rumors that he's on the trade block. And I don't know, a package of Boehm and one of the top prospects plus another 1 or 2 prospects, would that be enough for them?
Well, the issue with Boehm is it's like one of the Sox analysts in Chicago, kind of one of the reasons why they're want to trade Garrett Crochet is it's basically 2 ships passing in the night. He's only got 2 years left of control. Same thing with Boehm. So why would you trade your better player, basically the guy that's a pitcher now, even though he goes 5 days a week or every 5 days, to Boehm, who slid off towards the end of the year? And what the heck happened to him? What happened in the second half?
He after the All-Star break, the whole team hit a funk, and he had a hand strain that he was playing through for a little while before they finally shut him down in September. I think he spent a couple weeks off the field, and when he came back, he just wasn't for the last half of September. He just wasn't the same guy. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and then we saw in the playoffs he had to take a seat. Game 2 of the NLDS, Rob Thompson sat him down, and it sounds like it's based on his reaction to his struggles, his attitude perhaps, which is going to be something that would be a red flag for any team that the Phillies are shopping around for. It was quite the drop off. I don't know if the hand is the only explanation, or if it was just one of those things where the whole team was struggling, and then everyone grips the bat a bit tighter, and you can't do that in baseball. And it was the whole thing was tough to watch, Boehm included.
Speaking of watching someone that once tried to hit one-handed, Luis Robert Jr. when his wrist injury in 2022.
Yeah.
You guys, your site did a great job of exploring the Phillies, pursuing Robert Jr. in the at the trade deadline. First of all, are you guys relieved that you didn't pull off that deal? And secondly, you got a significant piece to give back. Are the Phillies willing to maybe circle back? Even though, again, now his demand is significant piece.
Yeah, that's something that's a move I don't see the Phillies making, and I was glad when they didn't that didn't happen at the deadline. I don't know how much truth there was to that. The talent is undeniable when he's healthy, and even if he is healthy, I don't know if that's a piece that the Phillies are really going to want to put into their lineup. Their biggest problem was they've got plenty of swing and miss already. They got plenty of power, plenty of swing and miss, and I just wouldn't see that as a move that they would make.
So Sox fans are sometimes, I get in the comments on the YouTube community page, even on SouthsideShowdown.com on the Facebook page, they're looking for a backup team. Why would the Philadelphia Phillies be a good backup team for any miserable White Sox fan who's just had to endure a 121 loss season?
The Phillies are a fun group, man. They are fun. They are fun to watch most of the time. But when you've got a team that that has that swing and miss, it can go one way or the other. And this last season was like that. The first 3 months, it felt like they couldn't do anything wrong. The second half, it was tough. But they're fun. All the flack that Bryce Harper gets in other markets, I think that's obviously his reputation for when he was younger. He's the guy's a leader now, plain and simple. And they've got some obviously established veteran pieces there. They play the game the right way, and the talent coming up through the farm system is going to make it even more exciting in the coming years. I don't think Aiden Miller is going to be a piece in 2025. Justin Crawford in the outfield has a shot. Andrew Painter will be there eventually. So they're going to have a good mix of veterans and young studs eventually.
Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow to go over more potential White Sox news at the winter meetings. Also, again, if Garrett Crochet does get traded this week, I'll either have a live reaction episode as soon as possible or a crossover episode with the host from the team of whoever the Sox trade Garrett Crochet to. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the Sox storylines to follow at the winter meetings, along with my chats with CubbyCribs.com, Jake Misner, and That Ball's Out of Here, Michael Fisher. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.